The defeat in World War I, the collapse of the German Empire, and the Treaty of Versailles, which appeared to be humiliating for Germany, created a new, aggressive, and decisive leader, Adolf Hitler. One of the most notorious dictators began to carry out his plan of revenge in the 1930s. Having come to power, the National Socialist German Workers' Party has sharply increased the army from 100,000 to 500,000 in just a few years and continued its growth. Despite the prohibitions, mass production of tanks and equipment was established. The Anschluss of Austria and the occupation of part of the territory of Czechoslovakia was made. After that, Hitler began to implement the plan to occupy Poland, Fall Weiss. His main objective was to capture Danzig with the so-called Pomeranian Corridor to open the way to East Prussia, unite German-speaking peoples, and expand territories. In the summer of 1939, the German Luftwaffe pilots actively watched the borders, and saboteurs in western Poland were preparing for decisive actions. Although British Prime Minister Chamberlain declared full support for Poland and its independence, the general political weakness of French and British leaders convinced Hitler that they would not wage war against him. The Führer of the Reich learned well the lessons of the First World War. The tanks, first used by the British, had considerable potential, so Germany spared no expense for their development before the war. The costs were fully justified. The 15-year evolution of the German machine resulted in one of the symbols of the future Blitzkrieg, the Panzer III tank with the Maybach engine. According to Sun Tzu, the war does not like duration, and namely, the prolonged war the Reich physically could not afford. In addition to tanks, a new strategy was needed, the equivalent of which has not yet existed before. Such a solution was found. It was described by the father of German tank troops, Heinz Guderian, in his book Achtung Panzer. The Guderian concept, which would come to be called the Blitzkrieg, lightning-fast war, involved the unification of tank, motorized, and infantry divisions into tank groups to capture and encircle enemy forces. The groups were supposed to support each other. However, heavy artillery could move very slowly, and airstrikes were a reasonable solution. This role had to be performed by the most formidable bombers, Junkers Ju-87, or Stuka, well established during the Spanish Civil War. They could enter the peak at an angle of 80 degrees and were able to drop bombs weighing up to 500 kilograms on their target. Their management required incredible nerve and courage from the pilots. The same was needed from the commanders. Guderian insisted on commanding divisions from the front and moving between important positions, as well as providing all groups with permanent radio communications for the speed and mobility of troops. Every Luftwaffe plane and every tank was equipped with a radio, which was an achievement at the time. For comparison, the units of 3 Soviet aircraft Cheka had a leader who gave commands to the movements of the wings, which reduced the effectiveness when maneuvering. Radio communication in the Luftwaffe at the time was a real achievement because it allowed pilots to react much faster. Germany has equipped itself with the best means of communication and weapons. Their opponents were doomed. The tactics of the Blitzkrieg included the deep advance of tank wedges and the destruction of the main enemy ground forces with active air support from the Luftwaffe. Before the operation began, the Third Reich signed with the Soviet Union the famous Non-Aggression Pact, also known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The pact was noted in history, notably by its secret clauses, according to which the Reich and the Union divided the spheres of influence in northeastern Europe. Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Bessarabia in the south were ruled by the USSR, and most of Lithuania was ruled by Germany. Thus, the two powerful states secretly divided Poland among themselves. They have carried out on the territory of Poland the sphere of interest border on rivers Narew, Vistula, and San. Over the following years, the document was amended and rewritten several times until it was annulled due to the outbreak of the German-Soviet War. The Third Reich began to draw troops to the Polish border. The Polish command was under no illusion and clearly understood that war was inevitable. However, under pressure from the Allies, Britain and France, it stopped the mobilization until the situation on the border became critical. On August 31st, Hitler signed a directive to wage war. The date of the attack was recorded with a red pencil on a map of the Plan Weiss. The Blitzkrieg, with its sudden invasion of Polish territory, had to completely destroy the Polish army within a few weeks. The Reich pursued the goal of gradually encircling the borders and destroying Polish troops. The situation was aggravated by the fact that Polish troops were scattered along the borders and there were no reserves in the center. By the time of the attack, only 30 divisions had been mobilized, which is only 2/3 of the army. Thus, the enemy numerically prevailed twice. The situation with the equipment was even worse. The 9 panzer divisions were opposed to only 1 tank brigade, mostly with 7 TP light tanks. The Luftwaffe provided more than 1,500 modern aircraft for the capture of Poland, which were faced by only 900 Polish, half of them obsolete. Before the attack, the troops were divided into 2 large groups, north and south. The attack was led by Fedor von Bock and von Rundstedt. The total strength was 56 divisions. Only from East Prussia did 8 divisions advance south into Warsaw and Białystok. 12 divisions advanced from Pomerania. The reason for the war became an attack by SS troops in the form of Polish soldiers on a radio station in the town of Gliwice. On the morning of the 1st of September, the Third Reich attacked Poland and launched World War II. In London, Chamberlain summoned Churchill to a conversation and offered to join the military cabinet of ministers, but they hesitated to react immediately. 2 days later, the Luftwaffe effectively destroyed Polish air forces and, with impunity, bombed cities, military installations, railway lines, and highways, creating panic. On the same day, the first substantial units of the Polish army were encircled in Danzig when Prussian Reich troops were joined by von Bock. Only then did London issue an ultimatum to Berlin, after which the Prime Minister spoke on the radio and announced the joint declaration of war with France to the Third Reich. However, the British were slow to help. France, having completed its mobilization, also did not attack the Third Reich, limiting itself to dropping printed leaflets along the entire border calling for German morality. The German command responded by conducting aerial reconnaissance in the west. That weeks-long stage when the Reich's war machine was with complete impunity crushing Poland was called the Twilight War by Winston Churchill in his memoirs. The inaction of the great countries played into the hands of Hitler. It was not until 4 days after that French troops attacked the western borders. In the first week, all the troops except the Poznan division were pushed back. It became increasingly clear that the World War I line of battle tactics had gone into oblivion. Reichenau's 10th Army split into 2 groups in Luge. Half were forced to retreat to Radom, and the other half went to the northwest. 2 tank divisions of the Reich advanced towards Warsaw. The 4th Army reached Vistula and also advanced on Warsaw. Only the northern group was able to hold the 3rd Army. However, she also had to retreat behind Narew, where they prepared at least some relatively powerful line of defense. It was the first week of the first Blitzkrieg, ending in defeat for Poland. The second week became even worse. In the south, the 14th Army advanced to the San River. To the north, 4 Polish divisions that had retreated to Radom were destroyed. The combined 10th and 8th Armies reached the suburbs of Warsaw. However, Polish resistance and German lack of infantry forced the 10th Army to stop the advance. The 3rd Army had already approached Warsaw from the east and sent some troops to Radom. The Polish army of the Poznan Group, which was joined by the remnants of 2 more groups and now had 12 divisions, was desperately fighting into the Warsaw pincers. Surrounded, the Polish general Kutrzyba ordered a strike in the south against the flank of the main German forces. Such a bold attempt involved the 8th, 10th, and even part of the 4th Army into the battle. However, the Luftwaffe air attacks stopped the Polish counteroffensive. Subsequently, the Germans captured the city of Radom, where 60,000 Poles were captured, and a week later, the Poznan Group completely ceased to exist. Polish command found the only right way out: to retreat to the southeast of Poland and form a new line of defense near the Ukrainian Lviv. However, Third Reich intelligence had already learned of these plans and sent Guderian troops there. The 14th Army advanced on Lviv and 5 days later merged with the Third Army near Brest. The situation was critical, but not fatal. Suddenly, however, on 17 September, the Soviet army stabbed them in the back, and the next day met with the Allies at Brest. On the Western Front, Warsaw and Modlin remained unoccupied. The incredible resistance of Warsaw, including civilians, was courageous but doomed. Constant air and artillery attacks made the Poles' efforts in vain. Modlin, a fortress 30 kilometers from the Vistula, hosted the remnants of the Torun Group, where they fought desperately until September 28th. On the same day, the USSR and the Third Reich signed the Act on the Partition of Poland, which became the first addendum to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The updated version, of course, also contained secret points, this time about the population exchange and the suppression of the Polish resistance. A week later, several Polish groups which survived ceased to resist. In the battle for Warsaw, at least 140,000 Polish soldiers were taken prisoner. Adolf Hitler himself came to see the ruins. The country with the population of 35 million people for many years fell into the clutches of those who wanted to enslave it and even destroy it. The next 6 years were very difficult for Poland. Already in the first days of full occupation, German police and the SS shot about 16,000 Poles. Essentially, officers and intellectuals. The situation was no better in the territory occupied by USSR. In just 6 years, about 20% of the population of Poland died. The total losses of the Reich during the execution of the Weiss Plan amounted to about 11,000 killed and 30,000 wounded. The Soviet Union lost about 1,000 killed and 2,000 wounded. In the same time, Polish casualties amounted to about 70,000 killed, more than 150,000 wounded, and about 900,000 taken prisoner. The number of civilian deaths and missing persons is still unknown. The Reich deserves some credit. It was an incredible example of Blitzkrieg. The interaction of the army, tanks, and aviation, the increased bombardment of cities and communications became an unbelievable recipe for lightning-fast war. The Poles were the first, but not the last, to fall under the German Blitzkrieg. France will pay for its inaction in just 6 months, and in a year's time, this fate will befall the USSR, which will regret the help of the Reich and the treacherous stab in the back of Poland.